Hi, welcome to Rev'd Up for Sunday. We are the clergy of St. Mark's Episcopal Church in New Canaan, Connecticut. I'm Justin Chris.
I'm Peter Walsh.
I'm Elizabeth Garnsey.
And each week we're taking a look at the Sunday scriptures in the Revised Common Lectionary, particularly the Gospel lesson. And this week's Gospel lesson is a doozy, and I would just say, animal lovers, beware. Let's hear the story. Reading from the Gospel according to Luke, the 8th chapter, beginning at the 26th verse. Jesus and his disciples arrived at the country of the Gerasenes, which is opposite Galilee. As he stepped out on land, a man of the city who had demons met him. For a long time he had worn no clothes, and he did not live in a house, but in the tombs. When he saw Jesus, he fell down before him and shouted at the top of his voice, "What have you to do with me, Jesus, Son of the Most High God? I beg you, do not torment me." For Jesus had commanded the unclean spirit to come out of the man. For many times it had seized him. He was kept under guard and bound with chains and shackles. But he would break the bonds and be driven by the demon into the wilds. Jesus then asked him, "What is your name?" He said, "Legion," for many demons had entered him. They begged him not to order them to go back into the abyss. Now there on the hillside a large herd of swine was feeding, and the demons begged Jesus to let them enter these, so he gave them permission. Then the demons came out of the man and entered the swine, and the herd rushed down the steep bank into the lake and was drowned. When the swineherds saw what had happened, they ran off and told it in the city and in the country. Then people came out to see what had happened, and when they came to Jesus, they found the man from whom the demons had gone sitting at the feet of Jesus, clothed and in his right mind, and they were afraid. Those who had seen it told them how the one who had been possessed by demons had been healed. Then all the people of the surrounding country of the Gerasenes asked Jesus to leave them, for they were seized with great fear. So he got into the boat and returned. The man from whom the demons had gone begged that he might be with him, but Jesus sent him away, saying, "Return to your home and declare how much God has done for you." So he went away, proclaiming throughout the city how much Jesus had done for him. The Gospel of the Lord. So what in the world do the two of you make of this? And do either of you want to switch with me for preaching on this day, which also happens to be Father's Day and Juneteenth, as the Sunday closest to Juneteenth. A lot going on that day, a lot going on in this passage. So if either of you want to do me a solid, that'd be fine too. But maybe you can give me some help right now.
Well, it's an incredibly visual story, and I think Luke is the great storyteller of our Gospels in my mind. And whenever we have a victim of something or a group of people, I think we have to perk up and realize that it's not by accident that Jesus bumped into this guy and, carries out his work and his healing. And I think it's much, much more than a healing. I think it's demonstration of the great reversal of, where the victims are restored and returned to their right mind and placed back in their communities. And that's so much more than just a healing of a man, because it's not just for him, it's really something for their whole community. And there's so much going on here. I'm going to hear from Peter first before I go right into that. I have a lot to say about that, but that's my first thought, is that it's a very important story in Luke and in all that Jesus is here for. It's sort of, to me, an ultra archetypal story of a scapegoat, a victim, a reversal, a healing, a restoration of a whole entire community, whether they're ready for it or not. Yeah. And they're not here.
Yeah, it's an incredible story. We've just taken a wild shift out of John's Gospel. We have been for so long discussing theological ideas, and now here we are back on the ground with Jesus. And this is just an unbelievable Lucan Spielberg moment here.
Yeah, that's good.
And I just can't imagine how great this would be in a movie. We've got Jesus crossing to the other side, and which is in itself an incredible thing. And in the context of Luke's gospel, in the context of Jesus' time, he's in Capernaum, which is a Gentile area, but Capernaum is a Jewish town, so-called Sea of Galilee, Lake of Gennesaret, and the other side is It's almost like saying like the dark side, the pagan side, and that's probably about 6 miles across the water to get there, and that's in the area called the Decapolis, which is the 10 cities. But whatever it is, these are pagan cities. So he moves into the Gentile zone here. So this has all the drama of moving into the Gentile zone, and then he stills the storm on the way there, and then it's on the opposite side. He steps out onto land, and a man from the city of demons met him. So we have this incredible motion as this guy comes out of the tombs and falls down before him, which is in some sense exactly the opposite, of course, of the disciples who are like, who is this that stills the storm? And these, they fall down before him. And then the demons speak, the great irony that the demons are the ones who always know who Jesus is. Right. And we get this is unbelievable. And then we get, the demons saying, don't torment us, right? When they are the tormentors. And Jesus again speaks to the unclean spirit. And they say to him, do not throw us into the abyss. I love that. We don't make enough of the abyss. The biblical Hebraic abyss is that the hole that goes to the center of the earth. But because the earth spins, you never reach the bottom, so you spend your eternity in a free fall. And the abyss comes up, as you know, in the book of Revelation. It is out of the abyss. That's where Satan and the demons are going to spend eternity when they're completely overthrown at the end of time. But in the Revelation, they come pouring out, and what do? They torment people. That's what they do. They oppress and possess. And then, it's unbelievable. And then, of course, that whole question where they beg him, look at who's doing, there's all this begging going on. They beg him to put him in the swine. And then Jesus gives them permission. So this is all about Luke and the question of Jesus' authority. And then the swineherd, as you know, leaps off the cliff, 2,000 of them. That's a lot of swine. That's a lot of pigs for the water. And then, of course, we have the guy, sitting at peace at Jesus' feet. And then the story just gets even better because the townspeople come out, and now they're seized with fear, right? Remember, the previous seized was the demoniac was seized by the demons, and now these guys are seized from fear. And then just like when Jesus walks through Nazareth, and they're going to throw him headlong off the cliff, and he just walks through, again, like an incredible movie scene. Here, they tell him to leave. He doesn't, there's no discussion of First Amendment rights to speak or something like that. He just turns and walks away, gets in the boat and goes. The thing is
he's a free man.
The thing is a story that's unbelievable. It's shocking then. It's shocking now. It's been shocking for 2,000 years. Yeah. It's an awesome story.
Yeah, you're right. It was made for Hollywood.
It is.
You mentioned Spielberg. I read, not to get too vivid for our friends at home, but I read somewhere that it's very likely that when this guy, or it would make sense that when this guy appears before Jesus, he's bloodied for having gotten his way out of these chains and shackles with which the townspeople have
That's very cool.
Have bound
That's
him.
very cool. I never thought of that.
And they've. It says he was kept under guard and bound with chains and shackles, for he would break the bonds and be driven by the demon into the wilds. So they were. They put him in bondage. They put this man in bondage for his own protection, but perhaps also for the protection of the townspeople. Right? This guy was a terror to himself and to others. But I wonder, what exactly is it that this man is afflicted with? Right. So we know he's got legion. He's afflicted with a demon. But what exactly is he afflicted with, right? Can we flesh that out a little bit? You called him a victim. He's a victim of what?
Well, like I said, I think it's more going on here than just, literally what's happening on the page. And one way I think is helpful for me to read this is to read the demons as the mob, the herd, and the crowd, all as one. And so this man is afflicted by a system that has cast him out to this margin, and he's tormenting himself. I mean, he's in the chains. He actually beats himself with, with stones, or I forget where does it say that? It says it somewhere. But he's kind of taken on the way he's being treated by the crowd. He's a total outcast. And people are okay with this. They keep him in chains. They keep him bound and out living in the tombs, off where they don't have to contend with him. And so he's accepted this, and they have accepted it. And Jesus comes, and the legion, the crowd or the mob, the herd, says, "Don't torment us. Go away. You're going to upset our system. You're going to take this. You're going to send us away." And that's exactly what happens. And Jesus allows the demons to go into this herd, a crowd. It's the word for the mob. And one maybe accidentally falls over the cliff, and so they all go over. Like, let's all do what the mob is doing.
Oh, wow.
It's not like Jesus sent them over the cliff. They rushed over. And in a way, I think it's that they, and by the way, I read this type of thing through the Girardian theology. So I'm sort of steeped in that around this story because I'm so fascinated by it. I'm not making this up because I think it's pretty genius. And it seems to make sense to me. But anyway, so Girard would talk about this as, a classic example of a scapegoat and this herd rushing over the cliff and into the abyss because it's an undifferentiated mob mentality mechanism that's going on. There is no definition of what he's afflicted with. Why is he out there? But every community loves a scapegoat. And it keeps them comfortable, and they can it's like the black sheep or, any community that has someone to worry about that's not themselves, and that someone's causing all the trouble and it's not me. Let's just get rid of them. Let's keep them bound. Let's keep them down. Whether they know what's wrong or not, and whether any of them really understand what's wrong with him, if everyone else is saying he's bad, they all just go along with it. And so when Jesus comes along and has this conversation with Legion, there they go. And then the man is restored and clothed in his right mind. He has a right mind. He has clothes. He has a home to go home to, a community. And when Jesus sends him there, they're very upset. I mean, this has really exposed their system, and now they have to get used to it. So when I have preached on this gospel, I really like to spend a little time on what happens to the community when something has completely shifted, and their system has finally got the cracks in it that were there all along, and they have to look at it. I mean, it's really upsetting. I mean, he might be clothed and in his right mind, but they are gonna go out of their minds trying to get used to it, the new normal, and have to contend with what they've been doing to him all these years. And then who will they blame for their problems, So I think maybe there's a lot to that to think about. And Jesus doesn't let him come along. He's like, return to your home. Like, wait till they need this message more than you do, So I think that's a really interesting dynamic that Jesus, it's also a huge responsibility for this poor man, but what are they going to beat him for now? He's clearly been healed. And I mean, it's dramatic. I think it's really incredible.
Wow, to all that. That's incredible. Yeah. That's really something. Because I mean, to answer your question, I'm in a really different place than the Girardi and Elizabeth here. That was incredibly beautiful, and you taught me a lot with that. So I was going to say that in the what is you had asked the question, what is he possessed with, or what is excuse me, and I would say that for Luke, a big portion of what Luke is talking about is Jesus' authority, divine authority, the demise of the devil. Remember, we had the book that was written by Susan Garrett, my professor, and I flicked it. I wasn't really trying to be disrespectful as I flicked the book on the floor, but maybe that was demising of the devil here as I flicked the book away. But that throughout Luke we have a tremendous movement where Jesus takes on the dark side. He takes on darkness. He takes on the devil. He takes on demons. And we might understand demons again through the kind of biblical eyes to be a legion of fallen angels in the hierarchy, a great hierarchy in the angelic world, a great hierarchy in the dark world here, and that these are lesser beings. And what is the purpose? We say this in our baptismal covenant. When we turn away from the darkness, we turn away from evil, we turn away from Satan, we turn away from evil, and we turn away from sin. And the purpose of evil is to corrupt and destroy the creatures of God. And here we have an example of, say, if we took the Book of Common Prayer, which goes from Satan, whose job is to turn away from God, and then evil to corrupt and destroy, and sin our participation in it, and you use this as a kind of paradigm. I think what we have here is we can see the demons are literally corrupting and destroying this man who is destroying himself, right, and has superhuman powers to break these shackles, and it could be argued that they're trying to protect him even from himself, not just from each other. And so that Jesus has authority to overthrow. In the gospel, he has to overthrow Satan. He has the authority to overthrow evil and the demon, and he invites us to overthrow sin too. So that would be the lens that I would look at, the Girardian lens. I'd be like, oh wow, that is super cool. But that's not the place where I was going to go as an answer to what's happening here.
Yeah. I mean, I think that the two of you have scratched the surface of the depths of this passage. I mean, one of the things that we've, I think, found in our communal exploration of the scriptures is that these stories are never just what they seem on the surface. They have hidden spiritual depths, and I'm reminded of the way that pre-modern Christians so often read the scriptures as having both a literal and a spiritual sense. And the spiritual sense, they could, sometimes the medievals and the early church fathers broke these down into 3 or 4 total senses, right? It depends on which one you're reading, whether there are 2 spiritual senses or 3 or so on, but you could think of them as the literal or the historical, right? The what happened on the face of it, the moral, the allegorical, and the anagogical, or the eschatological reading, the thing which has to do with the end of days. And I think what you're both talking about, I mean, you mentioned just a bit of the eschatological, right, and the invocation of the angelic hierarchy and the demonic hierarchy and so on, and that last vision earlier when you were talking about the abyss, the last vision of the overthrow of all of these forces ultimately, as foretold is a complicated word, as envisioned by the book of Revelation. But I think you're both talking about the moral sense here in a way. You're talking about the communal self-destruction. You're talking about spiritual self-destruction, forces of spiritual self-destruction and forces of communal, societal, social self-destruction. And I think this is a story of Jesus undoing the human capacity for self-destruction, undoing the cosmic capacity for self-destruction. That there is something about the let there be light in the beginning of Genesis that unleashes its opposite. That unleashes some kind of force of nothingness and undoing, which is what evil is. And you have that in the demonic, right, in ways which are spiritual, in the opposite of the angelic hierarchy, and you have that in society. You have that in communities, right? This seeming like this tendency of communities to unravel. And all that I would say is I would add that in the psychological too, in the individual, there is a human capacity for self-destruction. That we are, I'll just say being a human being is really hard. It's just really hard. Just really hard. We like to think that there's a manual for being a human being, and there just isn't. We also like to think that I think particularly in our digital age that we're something like robots, right? Where we can be reprogrammed very easily, and you just kind of like fit us with new code, and there you go. And we're not. I think that we're really bundles of conflictual conflictual and conflicting drives and habits. And I mean, it's a wonder that most of us are so well adjusted as we are. But I'm reminded of Freud, and I know many people think Freud was crazy, and Freud was crazy, okay? But Freud got some things right. And I've never seen a more powerful vision of the death drive, what Freud called the death drive in his later work in Beyond the Pleasure Principle, than the swine hurtling over the cliff into the sea, presumably, or into the lake. Freud thought that there were at least these two kinds of major drives in the psyche: a life drive, which we associate with hunger, instincts of self-preservation, procreation, and so on, and then a death drive, this thing within human beings that somehow longs for it to just all be over, to return to an inorganic state, to return to the stasis, the ostensible peace of something like something like the undoing of creation. I mean, I think of Iago in Shakespeare. Iago is evil, is a personification of evil, because Iago just wants to watch the world burn. And that's evil, right? And there's this in all of us, I think. There is an Iago principle. There is this longing for there's this longing for self-destruction, and we all have it, right? And Freud thought that this manifested itself in like obscene risk-taking behavior. He also thought it was like a forerunner of he described it as a forerunner of what we now understand to be PTSD. He called it the repetition compulsion. He was observing in patients returning from the front in World War I that they replayed this destruction in their minds over and over and over again. It was like their minds were fascinated by it. Not fascinated in a kind of like moral sense, like they wanted to be fascinated by it, but their minds just like latched onto it and wouldn't let it go. And here, regardless of how we understand this self-destruction, spiritual, individual, or social, Jesus, his grace is the undoing of it. Mm-hmm. And I find it so interesting that however it is we understand it, the crowd doesn't want it. Mm-hmm. They don't like it. They don't like their healing, yeah. Right? We've all touched on that, right? However it is we understand the self-destruction, they're afraid of Jesus. That's their response. Somehow they're resistant to the undoing of their self-destruction.
Well, they have to change.
Yeah, is that it?
I think so. I think that when you're healed or something's taken away from you, that even if it was bad, it's a change. Yeah. And people talk about, maybe it was even Freud who talked about change as a grief. It's a little death. And that's, I think, with this community, the man comes back, they don't recognize him, Jesus has upset their way, and now they're the ones who have to do the adjusting. And I don't know, I think that's hard. Sometimes it's hard, you remember the button we referred to that's from Calvary in New York that my friend Scott Carlton created, enjoy your forgiveness. We hear confessions, and sometimes, I've made a note over the years, sometimes the same people come back and confess the same things over and over again. It's like, well, you've been forgiven of this, you're forgiven. And it's hard to accept. It's really, really hard to accept and go live in light of it and not repeat or even just let it go yourself. It's hard to let go. And you've talked about us as humans. We are a mess. We're all contradictions. We're just the tangle of paradox and struggle. And I guess the human work is to work, right? Do the work. And remember at the end of Mad Men when the guy says to Don Draper's a big drunk and he just can't stop, and his colleague says, just do the work, Don, do the work. It's like get well. And it's really hard, but they have to work at it. Jesus does the undoing, and then we have to grapple with what that means.
Yeah. Oh man, a lot to say about Don Draper, and a shout out to Father John Kennedy, a former, our very own, right, a postulant in the Diocese of Connecticut, a candidate for ordination, Diocese of Connecticut, now working in Cleveland as a fabulous priest who has talked to me about Don Draper as the paradigm of the spiritual life, right? Yeah. It's a great show. Peter, do you have anything to add here?
Just to say, really interesting to listen to both of you again, and Elizabeth, your systemic questions that you raised up out of here, I find really, really interesting. I think that, from my perspective of looking through Lucan eyes at the story, what I see is that as Jesus moves through time, I mean, if you just simply plotted out Jesus's movements, throughout the whole gospel, but up through Galilee, what you see is a group of people who are launching themselves at Jesus, and that is it's a funny combination of people, right? It's the demons in some sense are both launching and repelled at the same time. You have the disciples who are following, and sometimes with great devotion, sometimes with like dullards, but nonetheless following. You have the feeding of the 5,000. That's also, Capernaum's here in Magdala. The place is just sort of up around the bend in the hills where these people came because they were hungry, and we have Jesus healing. It's a little bit like the question of His holiness. As holiness as that which is attractive, the fastens that you were talking about. Yeah. Evil as having a fastens, a kind of attraction to the otherness of the holiness, and also a repelling from it too, because when Jesus, it's simply too much. And so, for instance, when we were saying the other day, Jesus had things. I have more things to say to you, right, but you cannot hear them now. It's almost like Jesus' power is too much for some people, and they simply can't deal with it now. They just simply, they're just not there yet, right? But what we get in the picture is Jesus, a man of light, walking through this shadowy world. And again, it's an incredible, as you said, Luke is a writer. It reads as almost novel-esque like for us, because he uses enough descriptive language and enough scenes of drama and power, and you can put yourself in these places. And there's nothing theoretical about this. You've got a guy who's like ripping chains off himself, right? And
living in the tombs.
Yes, it's seriously fleshy and real. This is like gnarly. Yeah. This is a gnarly story, and Jesus brings His holiness right into the middle of the gnarl, and the message is we are all gnarled human beings, man. It's not possible not to be gnarled. And Jesus brings His holiness right into us. And are we the ones? Can we unshackle ourselves? Can we allow ourselves to be healed? Or do we also repel Jesus and say, not now, dude, get in the boat and go away. Come back when I'm ready. Or, I'm going to titrate you. I'll take a little bit of you now. I can't take the whole thing right now. Or else we're duplicitous with ourselves. Yeah. We say we're all in and we're not. We're not honest with ourselves. And that's, of course, means that we make zero progress.
I think that this discussion goes to show that the Bible is a real book for real life. This is a gnarly story for a gnarly people, right? For people who are gnarled up, for people who have been gnarled up by the world, people who have been gnarled up by the spiritual world, people who are gnarly in and of themselves, right? And I count myself among them. And we've scratched the surface here we've just begun to scratch the surface of the depths of this story. We've been in the literal, right? We've been in the demonic. We've been in the moral. We've been in the social. We've been in the communal. We've been in the personal. I suppose the best last word is the one which Elizabeth mentioned, which was enjoy your forgiveness.
I got to say one other thing here. Sorry, I know that was your last
go for
word.
it.
We're trying to get this over.
That's hilarious. This is the rector here.
No. I'm because we're talking about because you've named it as the gnarly story, and all I can think of is your nephew, who is that coolest looking guy who lives in San Diego. Shout out to Bo. Who nice. I never even saw his whole body. Nice. I just saw him looking through the window. I'm like, oh, and so
he's gnarly in the good way.
Exactly. That's it. That's what I want to say. Exactly. That Jesus is gnarly in the good way as he walks into our gnarled in the bad way lives. That's what I wanted to say. Yeah. Shout out to your nephew there.
That's really good. Yeah. God bless you. Like, share, and subscribe. Bye-bye.